Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. I begin in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. All praise belongs to Allah, Lord, Creator and Sustainer of the universe, and peace and blessings be upon His beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. My name is Nadeem Siddiqui. I currently serve as the chairman of the Board of Trustees of the Muslim American Society, MAS. Activism in our deen, in our faith, is a requirement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quite often in the Quran combines iman with amalu salihat. Amanu wa amilu salihat. That you believe and you do good works. Belief by itself is not a theoretical exercise. It is manifested through our actions. And these actions can be individual and collective in nature. There are prayers that we offer individually, and there are many prayers that we offer collectively. So the collective aspect cannot be forgotten. Similarly with the rest of our community actions. There are things that we can do individually, and definitely that is required, but there are also things that have to be done and should be done in a communal fashion, in a collective group work. And this has numerous benefits that we have for ourselves. The Quran clearly instructs us to go out and do work, and do so in a group fashion, not in isolation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us in Surah Al-Ma'idah, where He reminds us, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, and help you one another to righteousness and piety. And again, He reminds us in Surah Al-Ali Imran, where He says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمَرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Let there arise out of you a group of people, inviting to all that is good, enjoining what is right, and forbidding what is wrong. They are the ones who attain success. And so we are enjoined to do good works individually as well as collectively. This is something that we really have to try and do. When we look back at our history of Islamic work, it is a history of collective work. The Khulafa Rashidun did not do things individually. They picked up the baton one from another. Wherever one stopped, the next person would pick up and continue to build on those efforts such that we would have gradually collective work that is increasing over time. And that is the first benefit of collective work. It provides continuity from one generation to the next. It builds a collective memory. It builds history over time. And if you think about it logically, it makes a lot of sense. If you as an individual are extremely active, that is great. You do a lot of work in a particular city, in a particular center, in a particular area of work. And if you've spent 10 years doing a lot of work, you've generated quite a lot of excitement, you've generated some programs, you've impacted a lot of people. But then what happens? Suppose your job moves, suppose you get married, anything that makes you move from that city to another. What happens to that work? If you were simply working as an individual without backing from others, without cooperation with others, without collaboration with others, then potentially that work could die off. And all of those 10 years would just slowly vaporize. On the other hand, if you're working collectively in a group fashion, then there would be somebody else in that organization, in that collective, that would pick up the baton and carry that, and so your legacy would build and the work would build one from the other. That would result in the growth of the community. The second benefit of collective work is that we get strength in numbers. Individually, we're just one. But when we band together, when we're doing work collectively, we increase our strength. And you see this manifested all across, that you have unions of all of the different kinds, whether it's lawyers, organizations, societies. We all band together to get strength in numbers. The third benefit is that we balance each other's strengths and weaknesses. When you think of any corporation that's out there, it hires people who have expertise in accounting, it hires people who have expertise in IT, it hires people who have expertise in finance, people who have expertise in marketing and sales, and the technical expertise for whatever product that they're trying to make or sell. All of these bring their individual strengths that collectively make that organization or that company strong. And there's no individual Superman at work that has all of the different capabilities that are needed. And that is exactly the same with our Islamic work. We individually offer certain expertise that we particularly might be good at. And when we band that together with other people's capabilities, we're able to produce a lot more, and the collective grows a lot further. The fourth benefit of organized work, of collective work, is that it forces us to move together in an organized fashion. Individually, you may wake up one day and decide, I want to do something really fancy for the youth today. And so you take your youth group out for an outing. That's great. You got up one day, you made that decision, you take the youth out. And you can keep switching one day to another if you're working individually. But that may not necessarily force you to have a long-term plan. But when you're working collectively, you can't just wake up one day and decide to make a left turn. You have all of these other people in the organization that you have to consult and work with so that the organization as a whole is able to grow and develop. And that forces you to think beforehand, to plan beforehand, to be strategic in nature, to move the work forward in an organized fashion. And you see this again in our Islamic history, in the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. When the Battle of Badr was taking place, it was people giving effort individually, but as well as collectively. Where do we camp out? Is it close to the well, away from the well? You think through this in a strategic fashion. The Battle of the Trench, Salman al-Farsi came through, said, let's build this trench. An individual idea that was implemented in a collective fashion. This group work forces you to think through, take benefit from the ideas that every individual has, and then implement it in a collective fashion. The fifth benefit of working collectively in a group is gradualism. We know from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the most beloved work to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that is consistent even if it is small. So consistency in small acts is important. And you're able to do that if you work through in a gradual fashion. You do things in a small piece, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time, and you gradually increase in a particular direction such that you're able to grow. Again, if you think about work on an individual level, you're able to do things really quickly because you know your strengths and your capabilities, and you're able to adapt to yourself very quickly. But when you work in a group, it forces you to be slower, methodical, and gradual in your work. And that has numerous benefits. One, you end up doing things in a much more gradual fashion that, inshallah, will be much longer lasting. But secondly, you're able to move the community as a whole forward because not everybody is able to move very quickly at your individual pace. If you are simply working individually, you can move very fast at 100 miles per hour. But when you're working with a community, you can't drag everybody forward at 100 miles per hour. Everybody has their own individual circumstances. You have to slow down. So when you work through a group, you are forced to slow down. You work in a more gradual, methodical fashion, and that has the benefit of moving the community forward in a much more gradual fashion as well. And you're able to bring the community in the long run to a positive point. Finally, the sixth benefit of collective work is it's an extremely important and beneficial tarbiyah tool. It's a developmental tool. Working individually is great, but then you rely on others potentially who are close to you to come up and point out your errors and the ways you can improve and give you advice and so forth. But when you work collectively, you're forced to interact with one another. You're forced to work with other peers. You're forced to work in that organized fashion that makes you take advice from others, that makes you collaborate with others, that makes you negotiate with others. And so you're able to see that, your strength is such, somebody else's strength is such, and you negotiate to a point where you can move forward. You're also forced to work with people who have different attitudes, people who have different skill sets, people who have different thinking, and potentially even people who have different priorities than you have. And that again forces you to think how you're going to work with others without ignoring them. Individually, you could say, that's great. You have that priority. You go work on your project. I want to work on mine. But when you work through a group, you're forced to come together and say, let's work together. And if you can do that in a small group, you can replicate that experience in a larger community, and a larger community, and a larger community. And so you learn to bring the whole community forward in that collaborative fashion. It is for all of these benefits that we encourage people to band together and work together collectively through an organization. MAS, the Muslim American Society, is a national organization with around 40 chapters across the country. Our mission statement is to move people to strive for God consciousness, liberty, and justice, and to convey Islam with utmost clarity. We want to move people together in an organized group fashion. And this helps the individual to benefit, this helps the family to benefit, it helps the society to benefit. I invite you to take advantage of all of these programs and activities in your local area and to join and support MAS in your work. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.